Rain pelted the asphalt of Fort Harlan, the military base nestled on the outskirts of Virginia. Night had fallen hours ago, but the storm made it feel as though darkness had swallowed every corner. The guards at the gate huddled under the small awning, their boots slipping slightly in the puddles forming on the tarmac. Thunder rumbled above, and the wind carried a chill that seemed to pierce through their standard-issue jackets. Then, out of the gloom, a figure appeared, a young woman, soaked to the bone. Her clothes clung to her, torn and ragged at the edges, and her face was marred with bruises and scratches that spoke of more than a single incident. Her eyes, wide and terrified, scanned the gate anxiously. She staggered forward as though the storm itself tried to push her back, but she didn't stop. The guards tensed instinctively. "Halt! Identify yourself!" One barked, reaching for his radio. The woman froze for a moment, then whispered in a cracked voice, I need to see General Marcus Harlan, please. It's urgent." The words hit the guards like a sudden jolt. Marcus Harlan wasn't just any officer. He was a legend, a decorated general with decades of service. Why would a stranger, soaked and bruised, be seeking him in the dead of night? One guard, younger than the others, stepped closer. "Do you know him personally?" he asked, his voice low. The woman shook her head, her trembling hands clutching something pressed against her chest. "No, but he's the only one who can help me. He knew my mother, Evelyn Carter." The name made the older guard stiffen. "Evelyn Carter?" he muttered under his breath, a ghost of recognition passing across his face. Evelyn Carter had been a legend in her own right, an operative who had disappeared years ago during a covert operation gone wrong. The case had gone cold, officially closed, but whispers persisted among those who had served with her. The younger guard exchanged a glance with his colleague. "We can't just let her through," he said, uncertainty lacing his tone. The older guard shook his head. "Call the general. If she's telling the truth, he needs to know. Now." The woman collapsed slightly as the guards approached her. They steadied her, noticing for the first time the extent of her injuries. Her face bore the purple and yellow marks of recent beatings. Her arms and legs had abrasions that looked as though she'd fought her way through harsh conditions. And yet, despite her weakened state, there was a determination in her gaze that refused to let her give in. When the call was made, General Marcus Harlan was in his office, reviewing security protocols for an upcoming military exercise. The day had been long, but nothing could prepare him for the words of the aide on the other end of the line. "Sir, a woman is here at the gate. She claims to know Evelyn Carter, and that you're the only one who can help her." Harlan froze. Evelyn Carter. The name brought back memories he had buried deep. He remembered the mission, the operation that had gone horribly wrong, the team he had led, the explosion, and then the silence. Evelyn had vanished, presumed dead, though her face had haunted him in his dreams for years. He stood abruptly, the chair scraping against the polished floor. Rain dripped from his coat as he strode toward the gate, his mind a whirl of questions and unease. When he arrived, the scene before him stopped him cold. The young woman, perhaps in her early 20s, looked fragile yet fierce. She stared at him with eyes that mirrored fear, pain, and a desperate hope. "General Harlan?" she whispered. Her voice trembled, barely audible over the storm. "Yes," he said cautiously, studying her. "Who are you?" She swallowed hard, glancing at the guards. I'm Clara Reeves. I need your help. My mother, she sent me." Harlan felt a chill run down his spine. The name Clara Reeves stirred a distant memory of Evelyn, of a promise he had failed to keep. Something about the girl's gaze, the bruises on her face, and the urgency in her tone told him that this was no ordinary visitor. This was someone tied to the past he had tried desperately to forget. "Come with me," he said, motioning for the guards to step aside. Clara stumbled forward, and he caught her lightly, steadying her. The storm seemed to quiet slightly as they entered the base, though the tension in the air was palpable. Soldiers watched in silence, whispers spreading quickly. Who is she? What does she want from the general? Inside the general's office, Harlan offered her a chair, though she barely had the strength to sit. He poured a glass of water for her, his hands trembling slightly, a rare crack in his usually stoic demeanor. Clara accepted it with a nod, her eyes scanning the room as though expecting danger to leap out from every corner. Finally, she spoke, her voice low but steady. "My mother, Evelyn Carter." She tried to expose them. The traffickers. The people who took her. They're still out there. And now they're after me. Harlan's jaw tightened. His mind raced through years of classified files, old reports, and missions gone wrong. He had thought Evelyn was lost forever. The thought that her daughter, or someone tied to her, had survived, and worse, was in danger, filled him with a mixture of guilt, fear, and resolve. Clara reached into her jacket and pulled out a small, battered locket. She opened it to reveal the initials EC carved inside. Harlan's breath caught. The locket was unmistakable. It had belonged to Evelyn Carter herself. "Your?" "Her," he murmured, almost to himself, the words thick with disbelief. Clara nodded, tears welling in her eyes. "I'm her daughter. I need you, General. You're the only one who can help me finish what she started." In that moment, the storm outside became irrelevant. Harlan knew life as he had known it had ended. The past he had buried had returned, bruised, terrified, but unbroken. And the story that had haunted him for over a decade was only just beginning. The bass, the rain, the thunder, the past, everything faded into the tense silence of two lives about to intertwine in a battle that would test every limit of courage, trust, and morality. The storm outside had eased, leaving a damp, heavy silence over Fort Harlan. Inside the general's office, the air felt thick, almost suffocating, as Marcus Harlan sat opposite Clara Reeves. His eyes, normally sharp and unyielding, now flickered with a mix of disbelief and fear. He couldn't take his gaze off her bruised face. The contours of her injuries were horrifying. The purple and yellow splotches around her eyes and cheeks told a story of pain, endurance, and survival. "You're her?" Harlan's voice was barely more than a whisper, but it carried a weight that made Clara flinch. It wasn't a question. It was a recognition, a sudden collision with the past he had desperately tried to bury. Clara nodded, her lips trembling as a fresh wave of tears slid down her cheeks. "Yes," she said softly. I'm Evelyn Carter's daughter. My name is Clara. They've been hunting me. The same people who took her. And now, they know I'm alive." Harlan's hand moved unconsciously to the locket she had placed on the desk. His fingers brushed the worn metal, tracing the initials EC, and memories came rushing back. Memories of Evelyn, of missions gone wrong, and promises he had failed to keep. He remembered the night the operation collapsed, the chaos, the explosions, and the silence that followed. He had convinced himself Evelyn was dead. And now, in front of him, was proof that she had survived in some form, through Clara. He leaned back in his chair, running a hand through his graying hair. "Why now?" he asked. "Why come to me after all these years?" Clara hesitated, her eyes darting to the office door as though expecting someone to burst in at any moment. "Because I don't have a choice," she said. "They're still out there. Powerful people. People who can destroy anyone who stands in their way. And they know my mother's secrets, the same secrets I carry. I need your help, General. You're the only one who can stop them." Harlan felt a chill run down his spine. He had spent years enforcing order, protecting lives, and maintaining a disciplined distance from personal involvement in covert operations. But now, the past had returned to demand his attention, and it had a face, bruised and desperate, staring directly at him. He stood abruptly, moving to the window. The rain had left the world slick and shiny, reflecting the muted lights of the base. He pressed a hand against the glass, trying to steady his racing thoughts. Years of experience told him to approach this with caution, to gather evidence, and to protect the chain of command. But he was no longer thinking as a general alone. He was thinking as a man who had lost a friend, a partner, and now faced the living consequences of those failures. Clara watched him, her small frame trembling, though her eyes held a steely determination. "They made me fight for every day," she said quietly. "I've been surviving since I was 15. I've been running, hiding, hoping someone would help. And now, I can't run anymore. I need you." Harlan finally turned to face her fully. His usual composure had cracked, replaced with raw emotion. "I failed her," he admitted, voice thick with regret. "Your mother, Evelyn. She trusted me. I promised to protect her. And I—" He broke off, swallowing hard. Clara's gaze softened slightly, recognizing the weight of his confession. "I know you didn't mean for any of this to happen," she said. "But intentions don't erase the consequences. And the consequences are still alive, still dangerous. I need to finish what she started." The office was silent for a long moment, broken only by the hum of the fluorescent lights and the distant rumble of residual thunder. Harlan felt the full gravity of the situation settle upon him. Clara was not just seeking protection, she was seeking justice, and the forces aligned against her were more powerful than anything he had faced in his career. Finally, he moved toward his desk and opened a drawer. Pulling out a folder labeled Confidential, Operation Silent Echo, he slid it across the table to Clara. "Everything we knew about your mother, her disappearance. It's all here," he said. "I kept it sealed. For years. I thought keeping it hidden would protect her. I was wrong." Clara leaned over, her fingers trembling as she touched the papers. Photographs of Evelyn, classified reports, operational logs, each page brought back fragments of a story she had only known in bits and whispers. This is her," she whispered, recognizing her mother's handwriting on certain files, the coded notes Evelyn had left behind. Harlan nodded gravely. "Yes, and now it's your turn. You carry her legacy. But be warned, there are people who will kill to stop it. People inside the military, people in positions of power, who don't want these truths to come out." Clara's jaw set. "I don't care about the danger. I care about finishing what she started. I can't let her sacrifices, all those years of risk, of hiding, of fighting, be in vain." Harlan studied her for a long moment. He saw something familiar in her eyes, the same fire, the same unyielding determination he had admired in Evelyn. But he also saw vulnerability, the kind that came from years of surviving unimaginable trauma. He knew she would need guidance, protection, and training, but he also knew that she had strength he could only hope to match. He gestured toward the window. "You'll need a place to stay," he said. "We can't let anyone know you're here, not yet. And we need to plan, carefully, because the moment they realize you're alive, they'll come for you. And I mean immediately." Clara nodded, her eyes fierce despite the bruises and exhaustion. "I'm ready," she said. "I've been ready my whole life." As Harlan led her through the base, past soldiers who stared with a mixture of curiosity and caution, he felt the weight of responsibility pressing down like never before. He had faced countless battles, commanded troops in war zones, and made decisions that shaped lives. But this was personal. This was about redemption, about correcting the failures of the past, and about protecting the living legacy of a woman he had once loved and lost. That night, as Clara was settled in a secure, safe room within the base, Harlan returned to his office. He stared at the locket once more, turning it over in his hand. Memories flooded him. Missions, laughter, whispered confessions, the explosive night that had taken Evelyn away. And now, her daughter was here, seeking not only protection, but justice. The storm outside had passed, leaving the world wet and glistening under the pale moonlight. But inside the walls of Fort Harlan, a different storm was brewing, one of secrets, betrayals, and revelations that could shake the foundations of power. And Harlan knew, with a certainty that settled deep into his bones, that their journey had only just begun. Tomorrow, they would start uncovering the truth. And when they did, nothing would ever be the same again. The morning sunlight barely pierced the thick blinds of the secure room where Clara sat, clutching the locket that had belonged to her mother, Evelyn Carter. Every bruise on her face, every scar on her arms, whispered stories of survival, desperation, and pain. Yet even in her battered state, there was a fire in her eyes that refused to be extinguished. She was a survivor, forged in shadows that few could imagine. General Marcus Harlan stood nearby, reviewing the classified files he had unearthed from years ago. Operation Silent Echo, photos of Evelyn, mission logs, and coded reports littered the desk. Harlan had spent the early hours agonizing over what to reveal, weighing the risks of exposing classified operations against the urgent need to protect Clara and uncover the truth. Finally, Clara spoke. "I need to tell you everything," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. She hesitated, then took a deep breath, her hands trembling. "After my mother disappeared, I was taken. They kept me hidden, moving me from state to state, always under their control. I was trained, watched, punished, to make sure I would never speak out. But I survived. I had to survive. I had to find you." Harlan's eyes narrowed. "They moved you like a commodity," he murmured, anger lacing his voice. "Do you know who was behind this?" Clara nodded slowly. "It wasn't just a criminal organization. Some people in positions of power, military contractors, politicians, even people close to your old operations, they were involved. They wanted the secrets my mother carried silenced, and I was their leverage, their insurance." The weight of her words settled heavily over Harlan. He had suspected that Evelyn's disappearance was not merely the result of a failed mission, but hearing it confirmed in such detail from her daughter made the betrayal visceral. He felt his stomach tighten. For years, he had blamed himself for failing to protect Evelyn, but now he realized the full scope of the treachery that had targeted both mother and child. Clara reached into her backpack and pulled out a small notebook, its edges worn and pages filled with meticulous notes. "I've kept track of everything," she said, opening it to a page with names, locations, and dates. "Every contact my mother had, every attempt to report them. I documented it. They think I was just a frightened girl, but I learned to watch, to wait. I've memorized names, patterns, even code words they use. This is everything she left behind." Harlan took the notebook, leafing through it carefully. His breath caught as he recognized some of the names, people he had once trusted, officers who had served under him. The corruption ran deeper than he had feared, intertwining with the very institutions he had dedicated his life to protecting. "You've been meticulous," he said quietly, his voice betraying a hint of admiration despite the growing anger. "Your mother would be proud." Clara swallowed hard. "I hope so. I hope she knows I'm trying to finish what she started. But it hasn't been easy. I've lost friends, people who tried to help me. They disappeared." Her voice faltered for a moment, and Harlan's expression softened. He understood the weight she carried, the fear, the isolation, and the relentless burden of survival. "You're not alone anymore," Harlan said firmly. "We're going to do this together. I failed your mother once. I won't fail you." For the first time, Clara allowed herself a glimmer of hope. She had spent years in darkness, hiding, running, and surviving. But now, in Harlan's office, she felt a spark of agency returning. She was no longer just a victim. She was part of a plan, part of a force that could finally confront the people who had tormented her and her mother. Over the next few hours, Harlan and Clara began to piece together a timeline of events. Each revelation was more shocking than the last. Clara described the network of traffickers, detailing how they had infiltrated legitimate businesses, military contracts, and even some law enforcement agencies to maintain their operations. She explained how her mother, Evelyn, had uncovered critical evidence that threatened to bring them down, evidence that had cost her life, or so everyone believed. Harlan listened intently, scribbling notes and connecting dots. The picture that emerged was horrifying. A web of corruption that stretched across multiple states, exploiting vulnerable individuals while hiding behind layers of bureaucracy and power. Every detail Clara provided brought them closer to the truth, but also closer to danger. "They're dangerous," Harlan said finally, closing the folder with a heavy sigh. "They've covered their tracks for years. If we move too fast or reveal too much, they won't hesitate to strike." Clara's eyes hardened. "I know. That's why we have to be careful. But I can't wait any longer. Every day we delay, they get stronger. Every day, people like me, like my mother, suffer because of their silence." Harlan nodded solemnly. He had faced danger before, but this was different. This wasn't a battlefield with clear enemies. This was a shadow war, fought in the corridors of power and in the hidden corners of society. And this time, the stakes were personal. For the next several hours, they strategized. Harlan reviewed old contacts who could be trusted, retired officers who might assist, and journalists who had once reported on military corruption. Clara added her insights, drawing from years of observation, survival, and meticulous record-keeping. Together, they began to formulate a plan, one that would expose the truth while protecting themselves from those who would do anything to stop them. As the day turned to night, Clara finally allowed herself a brief moment of vulnerability. "I don't even know if she's alive," she whispered, referring to her mother. "I don't know if she's been watching, waiting, or if I'm alone in this." Harlan placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "Your mother's legacy lives through you," he said. "Whatever she did to protect others, and now you carry that forward. You're not alone, Clara. Not anymore." The words brought a faint smile to Clara's face, the first genuine one she had shown in years. For the first time, the storm within her seemed to ease, replaced by determination and focus. She was ready to confront the shadows of her past and fight for justice, just as her mother had intended. Outside, the rain had stopped completely, leaving the base glistening under the moonlight. The quiet streets and buildings seemed deceptively peaceful, but Harlan knew better. Danger lurked in unseen corners, and their enemies were both patient and ruthless. Yet for the first time since Clara had arrived, he felt a flicker of hope. Together, they could uncover the truth, expose the corruption, and finally bring justice to those who had suffered for far too long. And as they worked late into the night, poring over files, photographs, and hidden notes, both Clara and Harlan understood one undeniable truth. The past was not dead. It had returned, bruised, battered, and demanding resolution. And they would meet it head-on, no matter the cost. The following morning, the base was shrouded in a thick fog that rolled over the Virginia hills, giving Fort Harlan an eerie, silent quality. General Marcus Harlan sat at his desk, The confidential folder of Operation Silent Echo opened before him. Photographs of Evelyn Carter stared back at him, frozen in time, a ghost of the past he had once mourned. Beside him, Clara Reeves hunched over a set of old mission logs, her fingers tracing the names, locations, and coded entries Evelyn had meticulously documented. "I never realized the scope of it," Clara whispered, her voice tight with emotion. "I knew my mother was in danger, but this?" She gestured at the files. She was tracking them for years. Every contact, every transaction, every name. She had a map of their operations. Harlan's eyes narrowed. And some of these names. He tapped on a list of officers and contractors. These are people who were trusted inside the military. People who could cover anything up. The realization hit him like a punch to the gut. For over a decade, he had believed Evelyn's disappearance was the result of a failed mission. Now, he understood the betrayal went far deeper. Clara picked up a worn photograph of her mother, Evelyn, taken during her early missions. Evelyn's eyes, determined and unyielding even then, seemed to stare directly at Clara. "She left everything behind for a reason," Clara said softly, her voice breaking. I didn't understand it at first. But now I see. She was preparing me to finish what she started." Harlan leaned back in his chair, rubbing his temples. "Your mother was brilliant and cautious. She knew the people she was up against were powerful. They weren't just criminals. They had influence, money, and connections that could bury anyone who tried to expose them." He paused, looking at Clara. "That's why she went into hiding. That's why you were targeted?" Clara nodded, her eyes steeling. "I don't care about being scared anymore. I want the truth out. I need people to see what they've done, what they're still doing." Harlan's hand lingered over a particular document, a heavily redacted report marked Top Secret. His pulse quickened. This file, it was sealed years ago. I was ordered not to open it after the operation failed. It contains the evidence Evelyn collected, proof of their network, their trafficking, the corruption that hid them in plain sight. Clara leaned in, her breath catching. "You mean she actually had proof?" Harlan nodded gravely. "Yes, but it was buried. They made sure it would never see the light of day. And now, if we're going to bring justice, we have to find it." They spent hours cross-referencing Evelyn's notes with the base's archives, old digital logs, and backup files. Every piece of data revealed a horrifyingly detailed picture. A trafficking ring spanning multiple states, using legitimate businesses and military supply lines as cover. Names of contractors, politicians, and even some high-ranking officers were tied directly to the operations Evelyn had exposed. "This isn't just about saving me," Clara said quietly. "This is about everyone they've hurt, everyone they've silenced." Her hands shook slightly as she flipped through a series of reports that listed victims' names, some of them familiar to her from whispered accounts during her captivity. Harlan's face darkened. "And they've covered their tracks well. Every time someone tried to bring them down, they disappeared, legally, politically, or otherwise." He hesitated, choosing his next words carefully. "That's why your mother was silenced. And now, they will see you as the same threat." Clara swallowed hard. "I've lived in fear my whole life, but on gun running, I've memorized everything. I know their patterns, and I'll do whatever it takes to finish this." Harlan studied her closely. In her determination, he saw echoes of Evelyn. Bravery, intelligence, and relentless courage. Yet he also saw vulnerability, the scars of years of captivity and trauma. He realized the enormity of the challenge before them, exposing a network that had remained hidden, powerful, and untouchable for decades. "We need allies," Harlan said finally, closing the top-secret folder. "People who can help us navigate this safely. Retired officers who still have loyalty, journalists who are willing to risk everything for the truth and careful planning. One wrong move, and they'll come for you. And me. And anyone who tries to help. Clara nodded, her expression hardening. Then we plan. And we move quietly. Every step, every contact. We can't afford mistakes. Harlan pulled a small safe from his desk drawer, unlocking it with a key he had carried for years. Inside were hard drives, additional files, and photographs Evelyn had hidden from even him, her most critical evidence. He handed a drive to Clara. "This is it," he said. "Everything she risked her life for is here. If we're going to bring them down, we need to start with this." Clara held the drive carefully, as though it were a fragile lifeline. "I can do this," she said softly. "I'll make them pay for everything." Harlan shook his head, placing a hand on her shoulder. "No," he said firmly. "We're doing this together. You're strong, yes, but this is bigger than either of us. We need strategy, patience, and allies who won't betray us." They began contacting trusted sources, retired officers who had once served with Evelyn, journalists who had reported on human trafficking and corruption, and a few carefully vetted government contacts who could be trusted to move without tipping off the conspirators. Each call, each message, had to be encrypted, coded, and verified. The danger was omnipresent. Hours passed like days as they assembled their plan. Harlan realized that the general he had been all his life, disciplined, cautious, commanding, now had to be something more, a protector, a strategist, a shield for a young woman whose life was in danger. And Clara, for her part, was discovering how to channel years of fear, trauma, and survival into the sharp edge of a fight for justice. As night fell again over Fort Harlan, the rain returned, tapping against the windows like the ticking of a clock. Outside, the base was quiet, deceptively so. Inside, however, a storm of its own raged, a storm of discovery, preparation, and the simmering anger of two people who had suffered at the hands of a hidden network of corruption. Clara placed the locket on the desk once more, staring at it. "She trusted me with her secrets," she whispered. "And I won't let her down." Harlan nodded solemnly. "Then we make them pay," he said. "But we do it smart. We expose the truth carefully, methodically. One wrong move and everything, you, me, everyone who helped, will be gone." The storm outside intensified, lightning cutting through the night sky. And in that moment, both Clara and Harlan understood the reality of what they were about to face. A network that would stop at nothing, hiding in plain sight, ready to destroy anyone who threatened their empire. Yet, for the first time, they also knew something else. Evelyn Carter's legacy was alive. Her daughter had survived. And together, they would uncover every secret, expose every lie, and finally bring justice to those who had evaded it for far too long. The storm outside mirrored the storm within, tense, unpredictable, and unstoppable. And as they prepared for the battles ahead, one thing was clear. There was no turning back. The aftermath of their discovery at the depot had left Harlan and Clara shaken, but not defeated. With Evelyn's voice still ringing in their minds, they knew that retrieving the lost ledger and gathering more evidence was critical to taking down the corrupt network once and for all. The safe house had become a hub of quiet tension. Every corner was filled with maps, encrypted drives, and printed copies of evidence. The quiet was deliberate. Every movement, every sound could attract the attention of those who wanted the truth buried. Clara paced the room, reviewing her notes and cross-referencing locations. Each line she examined revealed a new pattern: supply chains, shipping schedules, and hidden accounts that had financed the network for years. Harlan watched her closely, impressed by her focus and determination, despite the physical and emotional toll she had endured. Her bruised face and haunted eyes told the story of years in captivity, but they could not mask the strength she radiated. "We can't just rush in," Harlan said, breaking the silence. "We know the ledger is gone, and the depot ambush showed us how prepared they are. Every contact we make could be compromised. We need to approach this carefully, or we'll lose everything we've worked for." Clara stopped pacing and met his gaze. "I know, but waiting too long lets them regroup. We need to act strategically, but we need momentum. They've underestimated us so far. Let's not give them the luxury of time." Harlan nodded. "Then we move cautiously, but decisively. We'll split our approach. You handle digital infiltration and intelligence, while I coordinate the field operations. And we bring in allies we can trust." The allies were carefully chosen. Retired officers who had once served under Evelyn. A few investigative journalists skilled in uncovering corruption. And former operatives who had vanished from public life to avoid the reach of the network. All were discreetly contacted, briefed, and brought into the fold. Each one knew the risks. Each one understood that failure would likely be fatal. Their first target was a series of warehouses linked to the contractor network, spread across 3 states. The plan was to gather intel, photograph shipping manifests, and identify personnel who could testify about the operations. It was meticulous work, requiring patience, stealth, and careful coordination. The first warehouse, located on the outskirts of Philadelphia, was deceptively quiet. Clara's skills in surveillance allowed her to observe patterns in security shifts, noting gaps and vulnerabilities. Using a drone, she captured images of the interior, documenting personnel and shipments without detection. Harlan coordinated the ground team, ensuring that every movement had backup and escape routes were clear. They struck at dawn, moving like shadows through the foggy industrial park. The operation was precise. They collected photographs, copies of shipping documents, and snippets of coded communications. Each piece of evidence added to the growing picture of the network, confirming suspicions of corruption that reached far beyond contractors and into government offices. By the second warehouse, their confidence had grown, but so had the danger. Security was tighter, cameras more sophisticated, and guards more vigilant. Clara's digital expertise became crucial. She bypassed security systems, disabled alarms, and transmitted evidence in real time to a secure server Harlan had set up. Every minute they lingered increased the risk of discovery. One mistake could expose them. And they nearly did. A guard, suspicious of a shadow moving near the perimeter, began scanning the area. Clara's heart raced as she signaled to Harlan. He gave a subtle nod, and the team froze, blending into shadows. The guard's flashlight swept the area, pausing near Clara's position. For a tense moment, it seemed as if the entire operation might collapse. But Clara held her breath, remaining motionless, until the guard finally moved on. The narrow escape reminded them that the network was aware, active, and watching. They could not underestimate the reach and ruthlessness of their enemies. Every shipment, every document, every contact could be monitored. Every misstep could be fatal. After days of carefully coordinated operations, the team identified the key hub, a private contractor's logistics center with links to the highest levels of the network. Shipping manifests, encrypted communications, and witness accounts all converged on this location. This was the source of the operation, the heart of the network, and the ledger they had lost at the depot would likely be there. Harlan and Clara prepared for the next phase, infiltration and extraction. Evelyn's voice echoed in their minds. Trust the redundancies. Trust each other. Move decisively. The instructions were clear, but the danger had never been more immediate. They were walking into a trap, or at least, that's what Clara suspected. As they planned. A subtle detail caught Clara's eye, a familiar pattern of movement in the contractor's logistics reports. Shifts, shipments, and personnel movements aligned too perfectly with known infiltration points. "They're expecting someone," she whispered to Harlan. "They know we're watching. The ledger may be bait." Harlan frowned. "Then we adjust. We anticipate a trap, but we don't hesitate. We need the evidence, and we need it before they can hide it again." They spent the night mapping escape routes, contingency plans, and signaling protocols. Each team member understood the risks. The operation was no longer just about gathering evidence. It was a test of survival, strategy, and courage under pressure. By dawn, the team was ready. Vehicles were loaded with surveillance equipment, encrypted drives, and emergency supplies. Clara reviewed the digital infiltration plan one last time, memorizing access points, security weaknesses, and fallback procedures. Harlan checked weapons, communication devices, and escape routes. Evelyn, though remaining in hiding, coordinated remote surveillance and support, ensuring that every angle was covered. As the convoy moved toward the target, tension filled the air. Each mile brought them closer to confrontation. Every shadow could conceal an enemy. Every signal could be intercepted. The cityscape shifted into industrial outskirts, and the hum of machinery, trucks, and night workers served as both cover and threat. Clara glanced at Harlan. "We're ready," she said, voice firm despite the tremor of fear she couldn't fully suppress. Harlan nodded. "No turning back now. We do this together, precise, calculated, and prepared for anything." As the facility loomed ahead, a sense of foreboding settled over the team. They were stepping into a den of danger, armed with nothing but courage, intelligence, and the knowledge that the ledger and their mission were critical to exposing decades of corruption. Every step, every breath, every calculation brought them closer to the confrontation that would define the next chapter of their mission. The depot ambush that awaited them, the trap that would test their survival, and the resilience that would carry them forward. In the shadows of the industrial night, Clara and Harlan understood the truth. The enemy was watching. The stakes had never been higher, and the line between success and failure was razor thin. The trap had not yet sprung, but it was coming, and when it did, nothing would be the same. They had thought themselves cautious, precise in their movements, careful with contacts, and surgical with the information they released. After weeks of slow, grinding progress, General Marcus Harlan and Clara Reeves had begun to stitch together a pattern no one in authority could easily dismiss. Leads from Evelyn's hard drive pointed them to one place, a private contractor's logistics depot on the outskirts of a Midwestern industrial town. The depot's shipping manifests matched code phrases Evelyn had recorded. The names in Clara's notebook mapped to shell companies that funneled people and equipment through military supply routes. It was the kind of target that made them both breathe with cold determination. Harlan had arranged the meeting through a retired lieutenant who owed him a favor and a journalist willing to file a story the moment they had irrefutable proof. The plan was simple, almost painfully so. Meet a whistleblower who claimed to have a copy of a ledger that would connect the contractor to politicians and officers who profited from the trafficking network. Take possession of the ledger, verify its authenticity, then feed it through vetted channels that would trigger federal investigations. They had rehearsed escape routes, verified encrypted comms, and arranged for backup from 2 trusted former operatives. In their war, the slow work of patience felt like progress. The depot itself squatted between corrugated warehouses and a river that smelled faintly of molasses and rust. Trucks rolled in at odd hours. Men in work vests moved like ghosts. Harlan parked Clara in the shadows of a loading dock and watched her slip into the role she had played her entire life. Quiet, watchful, invisible. He'd taught her some surveillance techniques over the past weeks. How to read a pattern in 8 counts. How to disappear in a crowd. And she had learned like she had learned to survive, with fierce attention. At 2:10, A small van pulled up beside a rusted dumpster. A man with a factory cap glanced around and stepped out, clutching a slim cardboard file box like a relic. Harlan and the lieutenant moved in, their silhouettes swallowed by midnight. The journalist, hidden in a sedan 2 blocks away with a camera and a ragged notebook, flicked a signal light once. Green. The operatives on standby tightened their grips. Everything was aligned. The whistleblower claimed he'd worked the manifests and could prove the contractor had been shipping livestock, some coded term, to several overseas sites on requisition logs that had been signed and rubber-stamped by people who now walked in uniform. He handed the box to the lieutenant, whispering, "They'll kill me if they find out I spoke to you." The lieutenant nodded, sliding the box toward Harlan. Harlan felt the weight of it, not just the physical heft, but the gravity of lives possibly documented inside. He pushed back the cardboard lid and fished around until his fingers closed on a thin envelope, marked in block letters, Ledger. He glanced at Clara, whose jaw had clenched, eyes restless, checking every dark corner. She reached for the envelope, as if to prevent it from leaving the dock at all. They didn't make it 10 steps away. The first shot wasn't loud. It was a muted pop, the kind that comes from a suppressed firearm, a sound the human ear sometimes interprets as a branch snapping. The second shot hit much closer to the ear, a searing crack that cut through the night. The whistleblower cursed and dove toward the van. Men in dark tactical jackets emerged from 3 different shadows, efficient and horribly organized. It was no warehouse crew. It was a hit team. "Ambush! Ambush!" The lieutenant yelled, voice full of raw fear. They were trained for fire and fury, but most of their experience had been on open fields, not in fenced depots where bullets could ricochet and civilians could be caught in crossfire. The journalist threw the camera down and sprinted for the sedan, engine coughing to life, his signal lost in the sudden chaos. Harlan reached instinctively for Clara and shoved her behind a stack of pallets. He saw the lieutenant go down, a spray of sparks where steel met concrete. The operatives they'd counted on were pinned, their training no match for the speed and number of the attackers. From the far side of the dock, a figure stepped forward in the still rain. A colonel whose name had once been on a list of all eyes, now smiling as he held a pistol at hip level. Betrayal tasted like metal in the air. "You should have stayed home, Marcus," the colonel said, voice calm and clinical. "People like you stir things up. People like your pretty friend here bring noise the wrong people can't ignore." His grin widened as if savoring some private amusement. Clara's breath hitched. She'd trusted a contact who'd vouched for the meeting. Someone had sold them out from within, someone with access to the depot, to the logs, to the men who would strike without hesitation. She felt the ledger being wrenched from the lieutenant's hands, tossed like a prize into the waiting van. One of the attackers stamped on it to make sure it bent. Harlan moved like an old soldier, fast, direct, competent. He pushed the colonel backwards with a shoulder and fired a single accurate shot toward the kneecap of a man moving toward Clara. The man crumpled with a howl. For a moment, it seemed they could break the line and vanish into alleys. Then a second wave of men, heavier, armored, appeared by the van. The air filled with gunfire and the sickening sound of metal ripping flesh. A bullet grazed Harlan's shoulder, searing hot and furious. He tasted copper. His vision blurred at the edges as pain shot down his arm. He forced himself to think of the most basic things. Control bleeding, move Clara, get them to safety. But another bullet slammed into his rib, a harder impact that took the air from his lungs. He felt himself crumple against a pile of tires, the world narrowing to the sound of his own breath and the pounding of his heart. "General!" Someone shouted, but the word was lost between the collisions. Clara's hand found his through the dark, fingers digging into his sleeve. "Marcus, you have to move. You have to." Her voice tore like silk. Then, as faces blurred and the cold floor came up to meet him, a radio, one they'd thought safe and coded, crackled. A voice, older than Clara expected, poured through the static like smoke. "Marcus, it's me." The world stopped. Harlan's vision narrowed to a pinprick of focus. The voice, thin but unmistakable, belonged to Evelyn Carter. For a dozen years, he had worn her absence like a wound. He had catalogued his failures to honor her memory. And now, in the middle of gunfire and betrayal, she spoke his name as if time had folded back on itself. "Evelyn?" He managed, sound like a stone scraping bone. "Yes," a voice said. There was no tremor, only a brittle calm that made his eyes sting. "I thought I made it clear I'd be watching. I told you, Marcus, that the people we are up against never stop. I've been in deeper shadows than you imagined." Static washed over her words, but the certainty was there. "Where are you?" Harlan grunted through blood-soured breath. The world tilted. His hearing faltered. He could hear the stomp of boots, the metallic clang of someone prying open the ledger box, the barking commands of men who had turned secrecy into currency. "There's no time," Evelyn replied. "You have to get Clara out. You have to make sure that ledger gets into the right hands. They've taken the evidence tonight, but they made a mistake. They underestimated how many copies exist." The voice softened. "I planted redundancies. I always did." Clara's fingers tightened around Harlan's wrist like a vice. "Evelyn?" she said, more a question to the dark than to the radio. Her breath came as a jagged thing, her heart loud in the cramped space. The sound made Harlan angry with himself for letting her be in this moment. Angry that he had been wounded, that he had failed to protect her when they should have been ready. "Listen to me," Evelyn said. "They won this round, but not the war. Don't let them break you. There are allies you don't know about. Trust the signal we discussed. When you hear the fifth chime, go to the drop at mile marker 12. Leave everything there in a sealed satchel. Don't confront them. Run, regroup, and then hit them where it hurts." "How?" Harlan's sentence dissolved into pain. "Trust Clara," she cut in. "She has your back. And Marcus, finish it. For both of us." The line went dead as the van peeled away with a roar. The attackers melted into the night like water poured into sand. The depot grew suddenly quiet, the kind of hollow stillness left in the wake of violence. Harlan tried to rise and almost didn't make it. Clara hauled him up with a strength born of terror and habit. They moved like shadows through service corridors and maintenance doors. They escaped, not cleanly, not without cost, but they escaped. The ledger was gone. The lieutenant lay where he'd fallen, breathing ragged and raw, fingers stained with the evidence of their attempt. The journalist had vanished. Their other contacts had either been captured or scattered. As they reached the safety of a rental car Harlan had arranged in the perimeter weeks ago, Clara slid into the driver's seat, hands shaking. Harlan's shirt was dark with blood. He gripped the wheel with trembling fingers and remembered Evelyn's voice, a ghostly command that became the thread of their next move. In the rearview mirror, Harlan watched the depot disappear into the distance, a smear of concrete and neon, a wound where hope had been. But somewhere, in static and patience, Evelyn was still breathing. And for the first time in a long while, the notion that she might be alive did not only ignite joy, it ignited a plan. The trap had taken their prize tonight, but now they knew for certain how dangerous their enemies were, and that knowledge would sharpen their counterstrike. Clara drove without looking back. Harlan tasted iron and the bitter tang of failure, and yet, beneath it all, something steadier took root: resolve. The betrayal had exposed them, but it had also laid bare the stakes and the depth of deception. Evelyn's voice had returned like a lit fuse. The war had resumed in earnest. The safe house was quiet, eerily so. Outside, the wind rattled the old shutters, carrying the distant hum of traffic and the occasional wail of a siren. Inside, Clara Reeves and General Marcus Harlan worked in tense silence. Every surface was covered with maps, photographs, and printed intelligence, evidence pieced together from Evelyn Carter's hidden files, Clara's meticulous notes, and the fragments of information retrieved from the depot's ambush. They hadn't had much time to rest. Clara's hands were still shaking from the adrenaline of the escape, and Harlan's shoulder throbbed from the gunshot wound he had barely survived. Yet there was no room for pause. Every hour that passed allowed their enemies to regroup, destroy evidence, and strike again. They both knew that the people who had orchestrated Evelyn's disappearance would not hesitate to finish what they had started. Then, a quiet, familiar voice came from the back of the room. Evelyn Carter stepped from the shadows, her figure lean but unmistakable. Scars ran along her arms and face, a testament to the years spent surviving and hiding. But her eyes, sharp and commanding, were alive with the same fierce determination Harlan had remembered all those years ago. "Welcome back, Mom," Clara whispered, her voice catching. She rushed forward and embraced her mother tightly. The moment was brief. They had no time for relief. Evelyn's gaze swept over them. "There's no time for sentiment," she said, her tone clipped. "They've taken the ledger, but we've discovered their main hub, the operations center where they coordinate everything. It's heavily guarded, but it's our chance to expose the network and bring down everyone involved, from the contractors to the politicians who shield them." Harlan studied her carefully. "We'll need a plan. One wrong move and they'll bury us permanently." Evelyn nodded. "I've already prepared. This is bigger than any one of us. That's why we need to combine forces. You, me, Clara, and a few trusted allies who still care about justice. We hit them where it hurts, and we make it public. Nothing is hidden this time." Clara took a deep breath. "What about the evidence we lost? The ledger from the depot?" Evelyn's expression hardened. "That's why this operation is critical. The ledger wasn't the only copy. There are redundancies, digital backups, hidden files, and witnesses ready to testify. We've been gathering everything silently while they thought we were in the shadows. Tonight, we expose it all." Harlan's mind raced as they mapped the operation. The target was a fortified complex in the outskirts of Washington, a private facility run by contractors tied to high-ranking officials. Surveillance drones, armed guards, biometric security, the works. Yet Evelyn had spent years tracking weaknesses in their systems, noting times when guards changed shifts, vulnerabilities in the network, and patterns in their communications. "We'll need a distraction," Harlan said, tracing routes on the map. "Something that pulls their security away while the team infiltrates the building." Evelyn's eyes gleamed. "I've already arranged it. A simultaneous leak of a minor but public scandal, enough to shift attention, trigger internal chaos. By the time they react, we'll have already accessed the servers, copied the evidence, and left." Clara leaned over the table, pointing to a specific corridor on the floor plan. "The server room is here," she said. "It's lightly monitored at night, but the firewalls are sophisticated. We'll need digital access, but I've studied the codes they use. I can bypass most of it." Harlan nodded. "Good. Evelyn, you coordinate the extraction team. Clara, you handle the digital infiltration. I'll oversee security and extraction. We move fast. We move precise. And if anyone suspects anything, we disappear before they know we existed." The hours ticked by as they prepared, checking weapons, encrypting communications, and running through every contingency. Evelyn's team of allies, a mix of retired officers, ex-intelligence operatives, and a few brave journalists, arrived quietly, blending into the shadows of the safe house. Their expressions were a mix of apprehension and resolve. They had been briefed, and they understood the stakes. Success meant exposing a vast network of corruption, but failure would almost certainly be fatal. By 1:30, they were ready. Under the cover of darkness, they moved toward the outskirts of Washington. Harlan drove, Clara navigated, and Evelyn gave silent signals to the extraction team positioned in strategic locations around the facility. Every step was precise, every movement rehearsed. As they reached the perimeter, Evelyn tapped her earpiece. "Team, status?" One by one, calm but urgent responses came through. The distraction had begun. A minor political scandal leaked online, creating confusion among the security forces inside the facility. Guards were being reassigned, internal alarms were being checked, and surveillance drones were redirected to the wrong locations. "Move," Evelyn whispered. They slipped through the shadows, avoiding cameras and patrols. Clara led the digital infiltration, her fingers flying over the portable terminal. Firewalls fell one by one under her skillful touch, giving access to the servers and the hidden files. Meanwhile, Harlan and Evelyn coordinated the extraction team, neutralizing guards silently, taking care not to leave bodies that could alert the larger network. Every action was precise, controlled, and calculated. They could feel the tension crackling like electricity. One mistake, and everything would collapse. Clara reached the central server and began copying files onto encrypted drives. Names, transactions, photographs, evidence of trafficking, and the political cover-ups, all were downloaded and backed up. Every keystroke brought them closer to exposing the truth, every second feeling like a lifetime under pressure. Suddenly, an alarm triggered. One guard had detected movement. Evelyn's team responded immediately, containing the threat and signaling Clara to hurry. She worked frantically, finishing the download as Harlan coordinated the team's exit routes. "Files secure," Clara whispered, her hands trembling but steady. "We have everything." Evelyn nodded. "Good. Now we move. Stay sharp." They slipped out the back, disappearing into alleys and service roads pre-planned for extraction. Harlan's pulse pounded in his ears as they drove toward a remote, safe location. The stolen files were in their possession, evidence powerful enough to bring down the entire corrupt network. Once at the safe house, they began encrypting and distributing the files to journalists, federal contacts, and trusted allies. Within hours, the scandal exploded across news networks. Politicians linked to the trafficking ring faced immediate scrutiny. Contractors were suspended and investigated. Social media buzzed with revelations of the crimes, and the corrupt network that had operated in shadows for decades was suddenly exposed. Harlan, Clara, and Evelyn watched the news unfold, exhaustion and relief washing over them. The operation had worked, precisely, effectively, and without loss of life to their team. The battle was won, but the war for justice had only begun. Clara turned to her mother. "We did it," she whispered. "We actually did it." Evelyn smiled faintly, her eyes still sharp with the intensity of her years in hiding. "This is only the beginning, Clara. But today, we've taken back what was stolen. And we've proven that even in the darkest shadows, the truth can shine." Harlan placed a hand on Clara's shoulder, pride and relief evident on his face. "Your mother taught you well," he said softly. "And today, you proved that courage and determination can overcome anything." Outside, dawn was breaking, casting a pale light over the quiet streets. The storm of corruption had been disrupted, and for the first time in years, Harlan felt a sense of redemption. Evelyn's voice, quiet but firm, reminded him of the road ahead. Justice was a process, not a moment. But for now, they had struck the first decisive blow. Together, mother, daughter, and the general, they had faced the shadows, survived the trap, and illuminated the truth. And in doing so, they had rewritten the course of their lives forever. The sun had barely risen over the jagged mountains of Helmand province, painting the desert in shades of blood orange and burnt sienna, when Lieutenant Harris's team advanced cautiously through the sand-choked valley. Their boots crunched against dry, gravel-strewn earth, each step measured, each glance calculated. The air was thick with tension, heavy with the metallic scent of anticipation, the kind of quiet that made every rustle of wind sound like the approach of death. It had been 3 days since the team had crossed the line into this hostile stretch of terrain. Intelligence reports were sketchy at best, rumors of insurgent movement, sudden ambushes, and locals who looked away when asked for help. Harris's unit had grown wary of these mountains, but orders were orders. They were Navy SEALs, trained to handle chaos, trained to survive when everything else had failed. Yet, as they moved, an uneasy feeling settled over the men. "Keep your eyes open," Harris murmured to his second-in-command, Lieutenant Daniels. "Something doesn't feel right." His voice was low, a whisper swallowed immediately by the vast desert expanse around them. There were no birds, no distant animal sounds, nothing to break the eerie stillness. Even the wind seemed hesitant, as if aware of what lay ahead. They had barely crossed the ridge when the first shots rang out, high-pitched, almost surgical in their precision. Bullets tore through sandbags, ricocheted off rock formations, and found targets before anyone could see them. Men dropped instinctively, their training kicking in, eyes scanning for origin points. Yet there was nothing. No muzzle flashes, no silhouettes, no footprints leading away. Only the aftermath. Insurgents lying dead, untouched by panic, taken down as though by an invisible hand. Harris froze. He adjusted his night vision scope, scanned the mountainside, and found nothing. Daniels. "What the hell?" he muttered, his jaw tight. Daniels shook his head, frowning. We're pinned, sir. But no one's shooting at us. Not in any way that makes sense." The men exchanged uneasy glances. It was impossible. A sniper this precise, this far, should have been seen or at least tracked. Yet every enemy shot taken, every insurgent eliminated, seemed to originate from nowhere, delivered with absolute surgical accuracy. One by one, the ambush that should have decimated Harris's team turned to their advantage, and yet no one could explain how. A single bullet whistled past Harris's ear, embedding itself in a rock barely inches away. His heart raced. The men ducked behind cover, glancing frantically at one another. Then they saw it, a lone bullet casing, cleanly engraved with a tiny cross, lying on the desert floor where no one had been. "That's not possible," whispered Daniels. His voice trembled with disbelief. "There's no way." Harris picked up the casing, turning it over in his gloved fingers. There was something almost sacred about it, as if it carried a message. The men stared at him, waiting for an explanation he didn't have. He shook his head. "Somebody saved us," he said finally. "But I don't know who. Or how." From that day on, whispers spread across the SEAL teams operating in Helmand. Tales of a ghost sniper began to circulate, a man who appeared in the deadliest moments, eliminating threats with precision unmatched by any living soldier. He had no rank, no name, no record. He didn't operate under orders. He simply appeared when death seemed certain, leaving behind nothing but the faint echo of a gunshot and a bullet casing engraved with a cross. Some said he was a former SEAL, discharged or erased from the system for reasons no one understood. Others whispered of supernatural intervention, a guardian spirit protecting the men on the ground. Harris himself began to notice patterns. Whenever his team was pinned, when every angle seemed hopeless, an unseen hand would intervene, turning the tide. By the end of the mission, half his men were alive where only death should have awaited them. That night, Harris sat in the command tent, staring at the casing in his palm. The desert winds howled outside, rattling the canvas, whispering secrets of the mountains. He traced the tiny engraved cross with his fingertip, feeling a strange sense of reverence. "Who are you?" he muttered under his breath. "Show yourself, goddammit, so we can thank you." There was no reply. There never was. Only the endless desert stretching beyond, silent and indifferent. Back at base, the incident was logged in official reports as an unknown sniper neutralization. No name. No details. No explanation. Harris knew the truth, but he also knew no report could capture it. This man, this ghost, operated outside protocol, outside recognition, outside the reach of bureaucracy. He was an enigma, and that was his weapon. Word of the ghost spread quietly, like a secret passed from one soldier to another. He became a legend, not celebrated with medals or ceremonies, but honored in hushed tones over radios and in dimly lit mess halls. Every man who had seen the unexplainable knew he existed. He was real, and he would appear again when the cost of inaction was too high. For Harris, the mission's end was not closure, only a reminder. Somewhere, in those vast, unforgiving mountains, a man moved unseen, his rifle an extension of his will, his bullets carrying the lives of countless soldiers he would never meet. The desert had a guardian now, a shadow whose presence was felt but never fully seen. By the time dawn broke over Helmand, painting the mountains in harsh gold light, Harris had made a silent vow. Whenever he returned to combat, whenever his men faced impossible odds, he would salute the unseen sniper whose aim had saved them. He didn't know the man's name. He didn't need to. The ghost shooter's legend had begun, and it would echo across every battlefield, in every whispered story, for years to come. The wind carried the story across the ridges that day, and the mountains seemed to echo it back. A man without rank, without recognition, yet every seal saluted him. A hero whose battlefield was the shadows, whose victories were never recorded, and whose presence turned hopeless despair into survival. And somewhere, across those endless deserts and rugged valleys, the ghost waited, watching, calculating, ready to step into the fray wherever chaos demanded, as silent and untraceable as death itself.